The Great Outdoors. This is Scott Conway, PhD, JD at mothersraisingsons.com. We're talking about attention deficit, but in general, we're also talking about the overall mental and emotional health and well-being of our children. So the Great Outdoors. Now, I don't know how old you are who's watching this video, but when I was a kid, I was outside a lot. Back when I was a kid, we had no cell phones. So I would take off in the morning, and the basic rule, and a lot of people of my generation, the generation before me, had this rule, is be back by dark. And the measure was, when the street lights are coming on, it's time to be home. And so we knew that when we saw twilight coming, it was a race to beat the street lights. And most of our parents would give us a little bit after the street lights to actually make it home. So we have a mountain not too far from us, and it's not a really tall mountain from the bottom to the top. It's less than 1,000-foot ascension. The trail from the bottom to the top of it is like 1.25 miles, 2.5-mile round trip. They've built these great trails. Back when I was a kid, there were no trails. You just kind of made your own way up to the top. One of the things I was reflecting on as I headed up to the top and then made the stroll back down is when I was a kid, I used to go up to the top of that mountain. I used to live in that neighborhood. That was my old neighborhood where I grew up. And one of the things I was reflecting on was that sometimes me and my friends would take off, we'd head to the mountain, we'd walk up the trails, we'd kind of make our own way up, all the way up to the top, hang out up there, enjoy the view for a while, and we'd all load up and head back down and take all of our stuff back down with us and be home before dark. Now, by today's standards, that kind of seems insane. To have your kids, your 10-year-olds, heading out all day to go climb a 1,000-foot tall mountain, to go off miles and miles on foot into back trails where there's no marked trails, so you have no idea where they are. If you found out your kid got lost somewhere on the mountain, all you know is they're somewhere up on the mountain. And that was normal when we were kids. Now, I'm not saying you have to let your kids, in elementary school go heading out, walking around in canyons and on trails and stuff like I and my generation, the generations before me did. But to get your children outside, to get your children, even if it's as little as your backyard, out on your balcony, somewhere they can sit down and just kind of see the outdoors. You can go for walks, even just walks around the block or around your complex, or if you have any hiking trails or strolling trails, even getting out to Disneyland and the zoo and stuff like that, where your child gets to interact with the real world, to see things that are way over there, to be able to see things that are right here up close, and to go back and forth between them, where they're interacting with the real world. Well, things are moving past them, not because they're watching a screen and the camera angle is moving, or they're playing their game and they move their thumbs or their fingers and everything moves for them. But where if the world's going to come to them and past them, it's because they walk, they move, they're going somewhere. And they're interacting with the great outdoors. And the great outdoors doesn't have to be nature, but hey, if you've got nature near you, nature is huge. 2 blocks from where we are is a trailhead of a sort of a bit of a wilderness trail, and there's a couple of directions you can go. There's a different kind of terrain, and of course not too far from us we have things like the mountain we strolled up, and it's a marked trail, so it's not exactly a hike. I have sons who are Boy Scouts, and they get this Camelback badge for a hike that's over 30 miles, so I'm hardly going to call a 2.5-mile stroll up a 1,000-foot mountain a hike, but a stroll up a mountain, being out in the wilderness, being out in the neighborhood, being out where they're interacting. And even if they're just with you in the car, they're outside. Let them interact with the great outdoors. If they have their screen, if they have their phone, if they have a pad, and their eyes are just right here, they're disconnected from the world outside. Engage them. Play games with them. Ask them to spot something that you might know is there. Ask them to find it. Play that alphabet game we mentioned before. There's all sorts of things you can do where you're looking around for things. And some games, a slug bug where people are getting hit. Honestly, I'm not in favor of stuff like that. But things that get them looking around, things that get them paying attention to the world around them, things that get them aware that you're moving through a larger world, and to be able to see things and have to focus on things and have the brain engaging with outside reality. That can be enormously valuable for the brain, enormously valuable for the interaction and connection with the world around them, and just as one way to take advantage of getting them unplugged. And so if they're kind of stuck on their devices, stuck on their pads, stuck on their screens too much, that might not necessarily be the healthiest thing for them. and to just have some limits on that and look for opportunities to engage them in the outside world, just to try to balance it. Because remember, we're training the brain. We're helping them learn to interact with reality. And television has its place, movies has its place, the games has its place, the pads and the phones and all that stuff. There's a place for those things. And we want to counterbalance those. So we kind of limit the one and we counterbalance it so that way our children grow up. They're still able to interact with the virtual world, which is such a strong reality in life today and that they'll grow up in and our grandkids will grow up in. But also learn to interact with the real world, because that's also something else they'll need to develop the skills for. To have that to help balance out, to expand their ability to interact and their ability to pay attention, and their ability to have different inputs at different levels. This is Scott Conway of MothersRaisingSons.com.